Bible Club, it's Bible Club, it's Bible Club in our town. They're singing, they're laughing, let's get the word around. Folks are all excited, and we are all delighted. It's Bible Club, Bible Club, Bible Club, Bible Club, Bible Club in our town. So we have been learning about people who met Jesus, right? We've been learning about some people that met Jesus. Can you tell what kind of people are meeting Jesus in our verse? What kind of people are meeting Jesus in our verse? Daniel? Who? Oh, Luke? Not really. Who's meeting Jesus in our verse? Rachel? Children. That's right. That's right. Now, we haven't heard the story about the children who met Jesus yet. That's going to be in a few weeks. But we will. So who can tell me some of the people that have met Jesus that we've learned about? I don't know if I can remember the order. Ivanhoe? Do you know? What? Who? Mary and Joseph. And they were a young couple, weren't they? So we have this young couple. They met Jesus in a very, very, very special way, didn't they? God let Mary bring Jesus into the world. And Daniel, who's somebody else that met Jesus that we've learned about? The who? Oh, the officer, yes. Let's see, is he, which one is he? There he is. He's number 3, the army officer. That's right. Nathaniel, somebody else that we learned about that met Jesus? The shepherds. And shepherds are hard-working men, aren't they? Right, they're working men. So we have the hard-working men. Rachel, do you remember somebody else who met Jesus? Who? Yes, the army officer. We have him there. Does anyone else remember? Who? Martha. Martha and her sister Mary, the housekeepers. Yes, that's right. Mary and Martha. And you remember another one, Daniel? The street woman, that's right. And we couldn't see her face, could we? Yeah, she was ashamed. But she ended up being really, really thankful, right? Okay, so we're missing one last one. Nathaniel, remember who it was? Zacchaeus, that's right. And what do we know about Zacchaeus? He's small, but what's even more important to remember about Zacchaeus? Allie wasn't here. What does Allie think?
He was a tax collector?
Yes, the tax collectors, they weren't cute. They weren't cute. Even if they were small, people didn't like them. They were sinners. He was wealthy, but he got almost all of his wealth from being mean and stealing. But what happened to him? That's right. Jesus came and said, I'm going to your house. And he was on the way to the house, and everybody was saying, Jesus going to his house? And he thought, Jesus can't come to my house. I'm a sinner. But Jesus saved him and changed him. He says, I'm giving half of what I own to the poor, right? So we had a wealthy tax man. So today, we are going to learn about 2 recruits. Anybody know what a recruit is?
No.
Older girls, do you know what we mean if we say a recruit?
I've heard it before.
You've heard it before, right? A recruit?
For someone it's like
Chosen. Recruited. So a coach might recruit a player for his team. An army recruiter might recruit a young man to be in the army or in the Navy or something like that. And so here we have 2 recruits that we're going to learn about today. 2 recruits. And and who would these recruits be for? If we're talking about in our series, these recruits wouldn't be we wouldn't be trying to get them on a team.
or in an army, what were they being recruited for? Older ones, what do you think?
Sorry, can you say that again?
What would these two recruits, we don't know that they look like this, these guys are acting like they're recruits for the picture. Two recruits being recruited to do something. What are we recruiting them for? Not for softball and not for the Navy.
Probably like to like spread like the religion of like.
To spread the gospel. Or even before that, to follow who?
God.
Follow Jesus. So we have these two recruits. Jesus was going along and he was doing what he did. He was going around preaching the gospel to people, telling them about God, telling them about God's love and all of that. And he had some disciples that were following him. Does anybody remember some names of some of Jesus' disciples? What's one of them? Thomas. What's another one? Matthew. What's another one? James. Trying to get him to come to a certain one. What's another one? Can't remember anymore? Alright, what's another one? Peter. And what's another one? Not Daniel. Sounds like Daniel. You said James already, didn't you? What? Nathaniel? Nathaniel was one of Jesus' disciples. That's right. You know one of them? John. You remember some more? I don't know if I remember many more. Did he say Matthew already? Yeah, but anyway, there was Judas, right? There was two Judases. Yes. So Jesus had followers, right? And even we know a story about when Jesus went to Matthew, he was sitting there, he was a tax man, and Jesus came to him and said, "Follow me," right? And what did Matthew do? He got up, he left all of his stuff, and he followed Jesus. So another man, this man, he came to Jesus and he said, "Jesus, I'll follow you wherever you go." Well, that seems pretty good, doesn't it? He was pretty confident. He said, "Jesus, I can follow you anywhere." And I don't know for sure, but it sounds kind of like he's self-confident. He's like, Jesus needs followers, I could follow him. And Jesus tested him, our sign says. Jesus tested him. The man wanted to follow Jesus, but Jesus told him a couple of things, almost like Jesus didn't want him to, or wanted him to make sure. You know, this follower, this scribe, he was different. Do you remember the army officer? He wanted Jesus to heal his servant, but he didn't think, he says, I can't have Jesus, I can't go talk to Jesus myself, right? I can't even have Jesus come into my house. He felt very unworthy, didn't he? But this scribe says, "Oh, I could be one of Jesus' disciples. Jesus, I'll follow you." And do you remember, let's see here, the street woman? She knew that she needed her sins forgiven, didn't she? And she loved Jesus very much because he had forgiven her sins. But this scribe, he wasn't like that. He wasn't like, "Jesus, please forgive my sins." He came to Jesus and said, I could be your disciple. Now, we've been talking about a bunch of different people, right? Who became followers of Jesus, some of them. Yeah, all of them. And I've been inviting you each week to turn from your own way and be a follower of Jesus. Have you ever followed something else? The bunch of kids were doing something and you thought, "Oh, that looks like fun," and you went along and did it too? Right? Sometimes we do that. I don't know. Maybe you hear that there's something that you would like and all the other kids like it too, and they start running down the hallway and you run with them, or something like that, or you see a bunch of other kids have something at school and you think, "I want to have that too," and you begin to follow that. And you might think that, well, all those people follow Jesus, I should follow Jesus, or I could follow Jesus. And that's kind of like this guy. He says, well, I could follow Jesus. But sometimes people that want to be followers of Jesus think they're good enough to follow Jesus. It's almost like there's a young man. He wanted to be in the army, and he went to the recruiter and he said, "Sign me up to be in the army." He was smart, he was strong, and he was telling people, before long, they're going to make me a captain. I'm going to work hard, and they're going to give me promotions, maybe even a colonel. Well, as part of the recruiting process, he had to get his physical exam. And when he went to the doctor and they examined him physically, they found out that he had a heart problem. He thought he would be a great soldier, and in fact, he couldn't even be a soldier. In fact, he needed something from the doctors. He couldn't do it. And sometimes people, like this scribe, they think, oh, I can follow Jesus. I'm good enough to follow Jesus. I'm strong enough to follow Jesus. They think Jesus would be really happy if I followed him. And we think that way too sometimes. We think that we're doing God a favor. We might think, oh, I'm going to go to Bible club today because that would be a nice thing to do. We don't think about how much we need the Bible. We think about what we could do. And some people think that God needs people like us. Now, I will say, what God gets done in the world, he uses people to do. But he doesn't need me or you any more than he needs anybody else. People that love Jesus will serve him. But some people think, well, I can be important if God needs me. And they're like that soldier. I could be something really good, and really, we have a heart condition. We have sin in our heart. Can God use people that have sin in their heart? Because God's perfect. He's not a sinner. Somehow, people think that they have enough goodness in them that they qualify to be God's helpers. They might think following Jesus, believing on Jesus, is like, I don't know, being part of a special club and gives them special benefits. And God does bless those that follow him, but what Jesus says to people that want to follow him, or to anybody, says to deny yourself. Deny yourself. Give up. Be willing to give everything up just to follow me. And we don't know. So Jesus told this scribe, he said, I'll follow you anywhere. And you know what Jesus told him? You might have heard this before. Jesus said, you know what? The birds of the air, they have a nest that they can go home to. And others have a place to go. But the Son of Man, me, I don't have a place to lay my head down. Jesus, the way we would think today of being homeless. He didn't own a home. He didn't go around trying to, build himself a house or get a new horse or anything like this. His whole purpose was to give himself for others. And if you're going to follow Jesus, Jesus told this scribe, if you're going to follow me, you need to give up those things. You don't follow me just to be important or because you think you're important. And we don't know what this scribe did. The Bible doesn't tell us what he did, but the Bible does tell us that Jesus tested him. And we do know that every single person that understands what Jesus says when he says, give up, deny yourself and follow me, has never been sorry. Lots of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people through the years have turned away from what they wanted to do with their life and given themselves to Jesus, and Jesus has taken care of them. They didn't end up being homeless necessarily, but they weren't concerned about whether they had a home or not. So, some people that can come to Jesus this wrong way. Most the people, these working men, they were in awe, weren't they? And they came and they worshipped, even the baby. This army officer, he was like, I'm not worthy. I'm an officer. I tell people what to do, but I'm not worthy to have Jesus come see me. Mary, she just sat at Jesus' feet and listened to him, right? Zacchaeus, he wanted to hear Jesus, but when Jesus said, I'm coming to your house, he thought, I can't have him come to my house the way I am right now. And he turned from his sin and made, and the street woman, we know she was forgiven of her sins. The Bible says she was. So, but this man, he just came thinking, I can follow him. Now, there's another man. We said there's two, right? So this man, he said, sign me up. I can do it. Lots of people, we already talked about so many of Jesus' disciples that Jesus came to him and said, follow me, right? And James and John and Peter, they were working on their fishing equipment. And when Jesus said, follow me, they left their fishing equipment. They left it with some helpers for James and John's dad and their helpers. And they just left and they followed Jesus right away. This one here, Jesus called him. Jesus came to this man and said, follow me. And this man, he responded in a way that some people today respond. The first man thought he was good enough to follow Jesus. And some people today think that. But is anybody really good enough to follow Jesus? Nobody's good enough to follow Jesus. We have to forsake ourselves, and then Jesus changes us and says, I want you to follow me. This one, Jesus called this man. Jesus came to this man and said, follow me. And the man thought, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. But he said, let me go and bury my father first. Okay, now this sounds different, but let me tell you how things worked back when Jesus was alive. When somebody died when Jesus was alive, they buried them the very same day. They didn't have all the technology and medical things that we have now that we do to people when they die so that they look kind of okay in the casket or anything like that. They didn't have a way to just let them have a funeral a week later or 10 days later. In those days, if somebody died, they buried them that very same day. And most of the time, if somebody died in this culture, the men that were children of that men would get an inheritance. So when this man says, let me go and bury my father, he wasn't saying, my dad died this morning, I need to bury him this afternoon and I'll follow you. He was saying, I want to follow you, but my dad hasn't died yet. He's getting ill, he's probably going to die soon, but I want to stick around for that, because maybe it was, if I leave, I won't get that inheritance. And so this man, he said, following Jesus sounds like a good idea, but I want to wait. I'm going to put it off and do it later. And there are children, and there are people in the world today, God calls them. They hear the gospel preached at home, or they read it on the internet, or in a tract, or they go to church and they hear a preacher preach the gospel, and they think, that makes sense, I should do that, but I'll do it later. Some children think that way. They think, when I grow up, I'll follow Jesus. But right now, I don't want to think about it too much. There's other things I want to think about. I want to think about graduating from school and learning an education so that I can make money. And then I'll follow Jesus. Or I want to be able to do this fun thing. Or I'm involved with this person and I want to just do all of that, and then someday I'll follow Jesus. So this man, he was like, I'll follow Jesus, that's a good idea, but I'll do it someday. And Jesus told him, nobody that says they're going to follow Jesus and then turns their back on it is fit for the kingdom of God. I'm not saying that everybody who says, well, I'll follow Jesus, but I'll do it later, doesn't go to heaven, but so many of them say, well, I'll follow Jesus later, and they keep going in their way, and what happens? Their way of sin gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and grabs a hold of them so strong that later on, when they thought they would follow Jesus, they no longer have any desire to follow Jesus. They might even mock people who would follow Jesus. And they end up not in heaven, they don't end up in heaven. Not if they never turn from their sin and believe on Him. So if you're one of those kind of people that are thinking, you know, following Jesus is a good thing, but I'll do that later. Let me urge you not to do it later. Just like Jesus said to this man, don't do that. Don't put your hand to the plow and then look back. Straight away, follow me today. And I'm not saying me, Jesus said that. And I'm saying to you, if you're somebody that says, I think being a Christian is a good thing, and when I get older I'll do that, don't wait till you're older. Turn from your way and follow Jesus today.